Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first Paraspar lecture of this year, 2025. And we are very happy to have Professor Srikumar M. Menon, who will speak on celestial geometry, sun-facing monuments of South India, which is not only interesting, but also very topical. As we have heard that this month, we are going to see a lot of celestial parades. Let's see if Professor Menon touches upon them or not. So before we begin, let me give you a brief introduction of the speaker today. Professor Srikumar Menon is an architect specializing in ancient and early architecture of the Indian subcontinent. After graduating from the Department of Architecture, TKM College of Engineering in 1993, Srikumar spent 6 years in architectural practice at Bangalore, as well as research on the design of astronomical observatories at the Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics, Pune, before taking up teaching at the Faculty of Architecture, Manipal Institute of Technology at Manipal. After teaching at Manipal for 15 years, he moved to the National Institute of Advanced Studies, where he currently works as associate professor. Srikumar's academic interests focus on ancient architecture. His PhD investigated Indian megaliths for possible intentional astronomical alignment, and he was awarded the Professor D.S. Achutya Rao Memorial History Research Fellowship for the same. Subsequently, he was also awarded the Homi Bhabha Fellowship for studying ancient landscapes of South India. Under this project, he has studied the sites of Malaprabha Valley, Hampi Higher, Benakal region, and Sannati Shirival region of northern Karnataka. Currently, in addition to continuing his work on megalith and archaeoastronomy, Srikumar is also engaged in efforts to understand evolution of principles of construction and stoneworking in early temple architecture, and the practice of architecture in early historic to medieval period in India, including tracking early artisan of ancient India. He has a lot of very interesting and brilliant publication. Just to give you a sample of his wonderful publication, I'm just giving you the names of his book publications. Last year, he published a book, God on the Hills and Other Stories. In 2015, he published another book, Perspectives on Early Astronomy in Indian Context, and another book, Comets, Nomads of the Solar System, in 2013, among many others. We welcome you, Professor Menon, and invite you to give your talk.
Thank you for the introduction. I guess I'm audible. Yeah. So yeah, I work in National Institute of Advanced Studies down the southern side of campus, and yeah, I'm an architect and I work in ancient architecture. So I study temples, I study prehistoric monuments called megaliths and all that. I'll give you a brief flavor of that in the talk which is going to happen. So in this talk, I'm going to look at sun-facing monument. I mean, monuments which have an intentional alignment to significant points of sunrise or sunset on the local horizon. So there's a reason why I'm not touching upon alignments of other heavenly bodies, like the moon is more difficult to prove in certain cases, because the extreme points of rise of the moon itself oscillates between two extrema during over a cycle of around 18.6 years or something like that. And stellar alignments are also a bit of a problem, because of the Earth's precession, the rise and set points of the stars vary vary depending on the time period. And the kind of date uncertainties in the date range is provided by archaeology. You can fit some bright star or the other to any given alignment. So I've not been looking at stellar alignment so far. So when we talk about these monuments, what are these monuments? Some of them are prehistoric, like megaliths. I'll come to what megaliths are in a second. So in prehistory, we are looking at astronomical consideration in the layout of monuments, whether any deliberate alignments have been made in the components of megaliths. And also we look at representations in prehistoric art. So prehistory by definition means that it's a pre-literate society. They didn't leave any text behind. So we don't know the intent, express intent of the creators. But they did have things like rock art. For example, what you see here is a enigmatic representation of megalithic burial with a stone circle with sun and moon symbols around it. And here again you have a very common motif in prehistoric rock art, a person with a sword and a shield facing a sun symbol, which is here. I won't be dwelling upon rock art in this lecture. We'll be talking more about these kind of monuments where you have components of a of a megalithic stone alignment which have incorporated deliberate alignments to significant sunsets in this case. And then we look at later early historic period and the what you call the early medieval, the late medieval periods. We have monuments like stupas and then later temples and all that, where by that time sculptural art also made its debut. And then you have depictions of myths that have astronomical connotation, like the Tripurantaka myth, which is very commonly encountered in temple temple sculptures and all that. Once again, that's something which I won't be touching upon here, but there have been depictions of astronomical myths like that. Deification and worship of heavenly bodies, like zodiacal stone. This is a zodiacal stone that you're seeing here. Then, of course, sun itself is worshipped as a god, which you will be seeing in the rest of the lecture. And then there are these gods of the directions called the Dikpalas. And also, certain monuments have been oriented to face certain astronomically significant directions on the horizon. So we'll be looking at this phenomenon and this phenomenon in this particular. So coming to megaliths and solar elements, before I go into the astronomy as such, I'll talk about what megaliths are in case some of you are not familiar with it. So megaliths are basically, if you look at what the word basically means, it comes from two Greek words. One refers to the scale of the structure and one refers to the material. So basically it means built of large stones. Now subsequently the term megalith has been expanded to include some monuments which are not really built of big stones. In fact, some of them are not built of stone at all. But then these large ones were the ones which are initially noticed by early antiquarians and archaeologists, so that historically that name has stuck. Anyway, we'll be dealing with megaliths which are actually built of large stones here. So I'll be dealing only with one particular kind of megalith here, which is a stone alignment. This is one example of that. I mean, there'll be many stones. This is also an example of an alignment where there are over 2,500 stones arranged in a kind of grid. This has been destroyed very recently, but before that, the picture was taken in 2008 in a field which is an extensive field in northern Karnataka at a place called Hanam Sagar. You have these 2,500 stones arranged in a staggered grid. We do not know what the purpose was. Unfortunately, before we could figure out, it has been destroyed. But then you also have things like the dolmen, which is like a box-like structure, which was either commemorative or sepulchral in nature. Remains of people were kept within that. You have boulder circles with cairn packing. In this case, there would be usually a burial beneath that. Actual remains of dead people would be below that. And then this is another example of a stone alignment where the individual stones, which are called menhirs, are fairly substantial, and we'll be dealing with this particular site in this lecture. Then there are certain strange forms like the Kodakkal in Kerala and the rock-cut tombs of Kerala and South Canara, which because the response of the builders to the lateritic rock in that region, they have come up with these strange monuments which are endemic to that region. So I'm just rushing over what megaliths are. So we'll be looking at mainly at this stone alignment kind of things here. So we'll look at this one site in particular called Nilaskal. Nilaskal in Kannada means just standing stone. So which is what these things are. They are archaeologists call them menhirs. So they are basically stone slabs which have been quarried out and erected in the middle of a field. And this site was reported by an archaeologist called Narasimhaya in 1959, and it's located near in this town called Nagara, Hale Nagara, which is close to Hosanagara, is more well known among people, and it's nearby to that. And Professor Sundara has done a lot of work on this site here. So this is how it looks like. This is what gives it, the site its name. These are all standing stones, menhirs, and around 20 of them are noticed in different. In this open area here, but my investigation has shown more than 100 remains of more than 100 stones, because some of them, as you can notice, these are all pieces of stone which have been broken later on. There have been people who have been breaking off pieces of it and using it as washing stones and all that. So they haven't survived that way. But basically, there are remains of more than 100 menhirs here. Must have been very substantial at that point of time. So we are standing in the west now and looking eastwards, and the ground slopes down eastward. That has got some significance. I'll tell you later on. To site selection. So each individual menhir is like this. They've got a face like this, and thickness is rather much wider than they are thick. Okay, so the largest one, this is the one at the top of the ridge, and the largest one down below is about 3 meters at the base and about 6 meters high, and it's only about 25 to 40 centimeters thick. So even to quarry such a large piece of stone without the use of this might have been done in the Iron Age, but they did not use iron tools to quarry them out. So So they used a technique known as fire setting. They would heap firewood on the bedrock and set it ablaze. And then when it is really hot, they would quench it with water which has been thrown onto it, and it breaks the stone. And that's how they have quarried this huge piece of stone. More incredibly, you can see that this, if you measure, if you put a ranging rod here and put another ranging rod here and measure the azimuth of that, it is absolutely north-south. Okay. So I measured the orientation of all these stones here, and one look at this, you can see they're kind of tightly clustered around the north-south. Okay. So you don't find any stone that is oriented east-west or something like that. So one thing we can safely conclude is that whoever created this was concerned about the directions. They were, I mean, to manhandle such a large piece of stone, it weighs more than 8 tons or something like that. To make it absolutely north-south is quite a feat. So another thing that you notice here is that many of these pairs of menhirs actually frame the setting sun during the solstices. The shortest day of the year and the longest day of the year, you have things like this happening here. This is on the winter solstice sunset. So you can see that because there's one, you get spectacular pictures here. I'll show you one more. This is another closer view of that. Because there are some sites nearby which are built on flat ground and which look like early sites. So probably that's where they gained their experience in these kind of things. So what happens there is that when the sun comes very close to the horizon, there's usually haze at the horizon. You don't see it. You don't see it very clearly. Whereas here, because they've selected a site which slopes gently up to the west, you create a sort of an artificial horizon which is raised, and because of that, you do get pictures like this. This is another couple of you see here. And so this one is close here, and the other one is right at the top of the ridge that you're seeing here. And during the winter solstice, this happens. It frames the setting sun at that point of time. During sunset on the shortest day of the year. And the same two menhirs, like if you go back here, this same stone pairs up with another stone to frame the setting sun during the summer solstice also. So we've tried to see whether this was a calendar device. For example, one thing is we've done a contour survey here. So you can see that this east-facing slope which is here, you find the menhirs distributed, 110 menhirs only on this slope. And beyond the highest point, the ridgeline that you see here, there's nothing on the other side, even though there's plain ground beyond that also. So it does look like, we can never prove it for sure, but it does look like whoever created it intended the stones to be seen against the sky. So they were looking at something in the sky is what we can figure it out. Now, why did they do it? What did this alignment mean to them? That's something we probably will never know. All I can think of is that there is a pre-Vedic belief that good people, when they die, they go to the realm of the sun. So it could be that, or because these are all basically sepulchral monuments. I'm sure if they do an excavation, they would find, urn burials or something like that, and it's not been excavated so far. So so there's nothing beyond the ridgeline. And what we've been trying to do is that we try to look at whether you can look at the sunset on different days, mark out time throughout the year, whether it's a calendar device. Unfortunately, we couldn't draw a conclusion, mainly because there's been a lot of breakage, like I've been telling you. So only these pink circles that you can see here, the stones within this pink circle which have been shown here, they are the only ones we can be sure of are in their original position that they've been erected. Whereas the other ones, the ones in the green circles, have all been broken. So we don't know where exactly so given the large error in determining the position of the stones, we can't really make conclusions now. Unless someone does an excavation and can actually tell where the stone was originally erected, we can't do these kind of studies here. So yes, now from megaliths, let's move on to temple. That's quite a jump, because megaliths are roughly in the coincide with the Iron Age and the early historic period. So somewhere from 1500 BCE to probably the first few centuries of the Common Era. And then when you're talking about these temples, the first stone temples in southern India come in the 6th century CE. So they come in two nuclei, basically 2 or 3 nuclei. One is in Karnataka, what is present-day Karnataka, in the Badami, Aihole, Pattadakal group on the Malaprabha Valley. The other one was the Pallavas in what is today Tamil Nadu, and the Pandyas also had so this is roughly around the 6th, 7th centuries that it starts off. So we will be looking at this place called Badami, okay, which is in the Bagalkot district of present-day Karnataka, and it's one of the earliest nuclei of temple architecture in stone in southern India. So the structure that I'm going to talk to you about is not something you will find in any guidebook in Badami, because Badami is such a rich site, such a spectacular site, that this is a very small, insignificant thing, and people have not really concentrated on them. So this is what Badami is like if you look at it in a satellite picture. or U-shape, depending on how you look at it, valley here. And in the 6th century, a warlord called Pulakeshi I, he was the first king of Badami. So he created a bund across this western edge of this depression, and all the rainwater from here collects here and created this artificial tank called the Agastya Tirtha. And all the famous, Badami is famous for the cave, which they have scooped out of the sandstone. So they are all in what is known as the South Fort here, in the cliffs here. You have the, the cave temple scooped out here. And the structural temples, which are basically built by putting blocks of sandstone on top of, quarried blocks of sandstone on top of each other, they occupy the North Fort here. There's also this Bhutnath temple, which is very picturesquely sited on a platform that juts into the Agastya Tirtha. And this is the region that we will be talking about in this lecture. There is this large boulder to the southeast of this temple, and that's locally known as Panchalinganapadi. And that has this little, and also you pay attention to these two small boulders, which we will be talking about in this lecture. So these are some ideas. I won't go into too much of the architecture of Badami, which is a lecture by itself. This is the largest rock cut cave, rock cut temple dedicated to Vishnu. And about the endeavors of the Chalukyas, the early Chalukyas, what Pulakeshi belonged, the dynasty that Pulakeshi founded. And about them, the archaeologist called Cheshadri had made a comment that they might have cut rock like titans, because they have removed huge masses of rock from there, but they finished it like jewelers. Because that's the level at which you can see that if you go into cave 3, which was the royal cave, and you can see the sculpture there, they were at a totally another level in artistry. So now they also had smaller excavations, such early child. This is not a small excavation, this is a large one. This is at a place called Aihole, northeast of Badami, and this is there's a cave temple called Raulafadi, and Raulafadi also has got wonderful sculptures inside, but I'm not talking about that. To the side, to one side of it, you find this little excavation that, which you can see here. I don't know whether you can make it. There's a little, cube which has been removed from the bedrock, from the rock, and there is a little pedestal here where the idol can be kept. Of course, they kept something else, some kalasha they found somewhere, they kept it here, but there must have been an idol planned there originally. There's one more excavation here, which looks something like this. Now, I'm not very sure whether these were originally intended to be temples, because the real temple is here. I have a suspicion that these might have been exploratory forays into the rock, just scoop a little bit and see whether there are any faults in it. Like we keep crediting our ancient artisans about knowing the integrity of the rock. In many cases, you find that they found faults after they've gone, proceeded somewhere into the thing. So this might have been things like that, which later became adapted into small temple-like structures or whatever. But there are other excavations. Now this one I have attributed to the early Chalukyas. Some scholars say in the subsequent Rashtrakuta period. But whatever it is, this is another very small cave temple. You know that it is intended to be a temple because sadly it is very badly maintained. They threw all debris and all that, like you can see here. But if you remove all this mud that has accumulated here, you will find a small pedestal with a slot where you can slot in a deity. Okay, and you know that this is intended to be only this size because you have the door guardians, the Ganesha and the Durga idols here on either side. And I don't know whether you can see it, but there are tooling marks here. It shows that this cave is unfinished. I've put a closer view here. You can see the tooling mark, the pointed chisel that the artisans are using to carve out that space. But the cave that we actually like this, some archaeologists like Sir Shetter, who used to work with us till he passed away in 2020, he called it the empty cave, but nobody has written about it. Now, why it's called the empty cave? It's barely meters wide and not more than a meter tall. And this is something that the ASI has put now. Even before that, there was no floor to the cave. There was no pedestal. There was no slot for an idol. And the only thing there is a circle, which is usually a symbol. A disc or a circle is usually a sun symbol, painted in ochre on a white background. That's the only thing which is there. Now, why I say that this is, and it's fairly in the middle of this rock called Panchalinganapadi. Why I say that this is a finished cave is that because unlike the other one where you had tooling marks, here the sides have been properly finished. They're kind of planed here. There are pillars shown here. So it's a complete cave by itself. But there is no deity. Now, why that is the most. So this is oriented almost exactly towards the east. So 90 degrees is cardinal east. So this is some, it's not exactly, the sides are not parallel, it's a little splayed like this. So it's difficult to take an exact azimuth, but it comes somewhere around cardinal east here. And so if you crawl into the cave, which is very difficult because it's very rather constrained in dimensions, so you see that there's a large sandstone massif here in the east. So when you talk to the people, local people here, they say that, okay, the sunlight falls there every day in the morning. So that's a local legend that people talk about here. So I thought I'll just investigate for it. So the sun has to obviously crest the ridge, at least in the time when it is in the south, okay, in the southern part of the celestial sphere. It comes over the ridge, it will shine into the cave possibly. So this is, if you climb to the top of that cliff and look towards this Panchalingana Freddy, this is the cave, the empty cave that you're talking about. These temples, which are very spectacularly sited, they are not from the Chalukyan period, they come later, maybe around 11th century. But the core of this complex, the Bhutnath temple complex, is from the Chalukyan period. And another thing I should mention here is that some of my studies earlier had shown that this entire area here, this entire area, Bhutnath temple complex, is a place which has got connotations with death. Because there are many commemorative temples here. There are temples in which a person is shown wearing the sacred thread the other way, which is usually done apasavya, when it is done when you're doing shraddha rituals and all that. So and there are many other things which I won't go into, but just keep it in mind that this entire area was a place where temples were erected to the memory of dead people, so that they find a place in heaven. So this is another view of it. You can see the cave here, and this is when Agastya had water. Fortunately now again it's full of water now. And yeah, this is a cave. You can see that the sunlight is falling in this particular picture. So let's look at it for, so this is, I model it on CAD by taking the measurements on it, model it on a software called ArchiCAD. So this is very basic shapes with the basic dimensions I've taken. This is the sandstone ridge in the east. This is Panchalingana Fadi, and the cave is within that. And so I model it for 13 May 2018. There's nothing special about that date. I just happened to be there and I clicked this picture. So I wanted to confirm. So you can see that the shadow pattern more or less conforms to what the software has given. So I'm sure all of you know this, but in this particular case, you're looking at the eastern skyline. I used to teach in Manipal, and there I had a flat which faced the east, so I would photograph sunrise very often. So this little prominent bump in the western Ghats that you see from here is cardinal east here. So you can see that during winters the sun rises. Okay, what happened? Okay, it's come back. So during winter solstice, the sun rises as far back as this much. I don't know what's happening. I don't know. Yeah, and during summer, you can see, okay, I think maybe I'll not use this to point. And so, oh yeah, no, I'm not doing it. I've got a mind of its own. Hopefully that will, thank you. So yeah, so basically the sun rises east only during the equinox. It goes, in the summer it goes, the point of sunrise proceeds north, extreme northerly sunrise, and then comes back, you have an equinox again, and then again it proceeds southwards till it reaches the southern extreme. So we have to model, if you say that the sunlight falls in the cave throughout the year, you have to model it for equinoxes obviously. Model it for the summer and winter falling in it, then you can be sure that it happened throughout the year. So this is a simulation for the equinox day. So you can see the sun is coming over the ridge, and once it comes, okay, over the ridge, you can see that, no, I don't know why it's not. Okay. If I do this, maybe. Not moving. Okay. Suppose show the equinox first. I don't know why that's not happening. Okay, let's model it for summer solstice then. It's not moving, Ken. Yeah, I mean, the arrows are not working. Okay. Equinox. Now it should. It's happening. You can see that. I'll just play that again. So what happens is that now the sun has gone on the other side of the rock, and the rock's shadow is coming towards the east. I'll play that once again. Okay, you can see that. Okay, almost the entire cave is lit up during the equinox sunrise. And if you go to the summer solstice, so you're facing towards the west, right? When you're looking at this cave, which is facing east, so north is on your right. So you would expect the sun to rise from somewhere from there, and let us see how that comes through in this here. So you see that the southern portion of the cave. So there is some light falling in the cave, even though the entire cave is not lit up during the extreme northerly rising. During the extreme southerly rising, also the same thing happens. It goes the other way. So you can be sure that throughout the entire year, the sunlight does fall on unless it's cloudy or something like that, the sunlight does fall in this cave. Now, so what? I mean, it could be just a coincidence. So I just left it at that point of time till I came to see these two strange structures. These two rocks which I showed you in the first slide when I showed you the satellite picture. So there's one thing here and there's another little cave-like thing here. We will see what it means. So here, there is an unfinished sculptural panel, and at that you have, this is what it looks like. So on the left is obviously Ganesha, the center it is Surya, and this one I don't know what they plan to carve because they've only carved the pedestal out. They only marked out the pedestal, the idol has not been carved here. But it's very clear that the central figure in this triptych is Surya. Now why do I say it's Surya? Because, okay, let me say this. This very cheekily sited temple on top of a rock called the Malagiti Shivalaya or the Garden Maker's Shivalaya, it's actually one temple, it's not a Shivalaya. So today if you look inside the temple, in the sanctum there's a linga enshrined. But if you look at the Dwarapala here and the other one you can't see here, on the symmetric one on the other side, they are Danda and Pingala, who are Surya's assistants. And also some iconographic thing, when you go into the sanctum, on the side of it there is a representation of Chaya Devi and Surya's wife. So we know that the original deity enshrined in this temple was Surya. So there was a traditional sun worship. This is the 6th century AD temple. And in Pattadakal, there's a beautiful image of Surya. We know the artisan who carved it. He's left his name here. His name was Devaputran. And he's shown Surya standing in his chariot, the charioteer is Aruni. And there are these horses. You can see 3 of them here, and one in the center. So 7 horses. The clouds have been, so it shows the chariot of the sun plunging through the clouds. And all around are these Kinnaras and Gandharvas who are playing music, and that's the way it is described in this poem called Surya Shatakam, which we'll come to in a moment. So this is a close-up of Surya, and this is Aruni the charioteer. So he's standing holding 2 lotus buds in his hand. Sometimes he's showing 2 lotus blooms in his hand. So this is happening very often. So there is this shloka which talks about the form of Surya. He says that Eka Chakra Ratha means a chariot with only one wheel. So Surya's chariot has only one wheel, an obvious reference to the disk of the sun. And so, so the final part of it, so it's saying that Padma Hasto Divakara. That means that the lotus bearing, he's bearing 2 lotuses in his hands that you can see out here, and which is exactly what the central figure in that triptych also is doing. So it's an unfinished, idol of Surya. But you have, most definitely Surya here. So now let's go to the other rock. It's a very, ASI has put this grill here, so when it is open, you have to actually literally crawl into it. It's a grotto. You kind of crawl in on your knees and sometimes even lower than that to reach inside. So it's basically, behind that you have that huge sandstone massif. From that a boulder has fallen off in some distant geological past and created this grotto. On the rear wall of it is this figure, which is very enigmatic. So local people called him Koshtaraya. So they say that the local legend is that he was one of the Chalukyan kings that had leprosy, and then he would live in this grotto and bathe in the Agastya Tirtha to get cured. That is the local legend. So Kushta is leprosy basically. That's why it's called Koshtaraya. And but if you look at all academic publications on this, people either say it's Mahavira, because there's a lot of Jain architecture here. Rarely some people say it's Buddha. Okay, but and the reason why they do it, so he's sitting in Ardha Padmasana on a Simhasana. You can see the lions here, the backrest of the throne here. Can we do something about this? Yes, some loose connection or something. So, and he holds, his hand is held up in a, the instruction mudra, Vyakhyana mudra, and then he has a Aksha Mala on his hand. So there are these fly whisk bearers, the Chamaradharis in the background, and so let's see what Kaushtaraya is. So the reason, this is a front-on view of the same thing, and another reason why people thought it was Buddha is that the face is defaced. So they say that a lot of vandalism against Buddhist icons in the Hindu period, but then that's actually when Henry Cousins wrote a book about this place. In his photograph, you can see that the face was already there. In fact, when ASI was creating a small ventilator here, a piece of rock had fallen off and broken the face. So it's a very recent unintentional vandalism. So I make the case that this is actually Kaushtaraya. So the reason why they say is that these are the contemporary images of this is Mahavira in the cave 4 at Badami. Again, Mahavira at Meguti temple in Aihole. This is again the Jain temple in Meguti hill is also. So the carving is in the same way, and that's common to Buddha, Mahavira, and royal figures and all that, because that is what you call the broad shoulders, the Mahapurusha Lakshanas, that the hallmarks of a Mahapurusha. Super. And there's this one which was initially thought to be a Jain, one more Jain temple, but as Professor Shettar, who was who was a colleague, he is the one who proved that this is actually one of the very rare Buddhist vestiges in Aihole and Badami. So coming back to Kaushtaraya, you will not find a idol of Buddha having a mala in his hand. Also, you can see that he is quite richly adorned, which is not, so obviously he is not Mahavira and he is not Buddha also. There are these Vaishnava symbols. There is a Shankha here and there is a Chakra here, and the early Chalukyan kings were Vaishnavas. Okay, so this is definitely a Chalukyan king. Now I think this is taken from the Amar Chitragatha comic on Konark. Okay, so the legend behind Konark is that Krishna cursed his son Samba to be afflicted with leprosy, and when he was when he found out that he was actually innocent, whatever caused him to curse him, he said that you pray to the sun god and you will be cured. So he used to bathe in the Chandrabhaga river, which is actually the original legend. It's Chenab river, and then one day he finds that and he would pray to the sun god and he gets cured. So now I think it makes a connection. You have a sun-facing thing, you have a leprosy-afflicted king, you have a water body nearby. Only thing is that there's no record of him having prayed to the sun god, but that seems to be the case here. So okay, now the thing is that one thing to simulate it on software, another thing to actually observe it happening. So this 2023. The spring equinox, March equinox, I went there, so this is before the sun rose, so you can see that everything is in relative darkness, and when the sun rises, you can see that the monuments of the North Fort start getting lit up, the higher place start getting lit up, and then you can see that the shadows are creeping back slowly, then you can see that here the sunlight has fallen into it. If you do a closer view of it, here, this is in the morning when the monuments on top of that rock, Panchaliganapadi, are in darkness. So is the Yellama Gudi opposite on the other shore. And here you can see the sunlight has touched the Shikhara of the one across there. And yeah, so here you can see that slowly the sunlight has touched the monuments at top. The shadows creep slowly downwards, and then ultimately falls in the cave here, and it's lit up here. So you can see here when the place is heavily populated by langurs at that point of time, and then you can see that the sunlight has fallen into. There's quite a lot of drama. So anybody who had made this cave, they must have observed and they must have marked on the rock. They must have observed so many sunrises and then figured out where to, because if it was kept somewhere here or somewhere here, this wouldn't happen. And also if it was deeper than what it is right now, it wouldn't happen, whatever this phenomenon is. So this is just a few moments before the sunlight came in. This is the first glimmer of sunlight in that cave or whatever. So, and then you can see that it becomes stronger, and then if you go into the cave, this is what you see. The sun has come over the ridge and is shining into the cave. Now this phenomenon, so this is at the beginning of Chalukyan architecture. So we are talking about the earliest temple architecture in stone happening in southern India. And there are other cases, like if you look at the Mahalakshmi temple at Kolhapur, there is a festival known as a Kiranolsava, which is during 31st January to 3 days in Jan-Feb and 3 days in November. The sunlight just comes along the axis and falls on the feet of the goddess and then slowly lights up the entire thing here. So I'm making a case that this is probably not intentional. So what we have done, so this is a Mahalakshmi temple. the Shikara has collapsed, and this is the modern Shikara which has come up here. And this is a, so you have this is the axis along which it faces towards west actually, and it is slightly off west. That's the azimuth here is 256. Okay. And so here you can see that towards the deity it is 74, and you can see the sunlight creeping in. It's heavily populated at that point of time. A lot of people come to witness this, but there is nothing special about this date. So this is how the sun comes in. Okay, and then it comes into the portal, and it's a very long axis actually, and it lights along that and falls on the deity. So you can see here. So and the date I was watching, it is in 2013, I think, February. And after the light penetrated till here, it kind of stopped because there's a lot of haze at the horizon. There's other construction that happens here, and then the sun. Anything coming here. So what I'm trying to make here is that these are all added in different, this last mantapa was added during the Maratha period and all that. So when you string out different components with portals along an axis, that axis is primarily meant for people to come in, for goods to come in and all that. Sunlight also comes in. Okay, you don't know whether that's intentional. That you can only say if there's any, because these are all done in historical periods, you can say that only if there's a record which says that it happens that way, you can be sure that it was done intentionally. So I don't think that this particular thing was an intentional thing. But then there are these other orientations that found in the Hoysala dynasty temples. So Hoysalas ruled parts of present-day Karnataka in maybe let's say the 12th to 14th century CE. And there is one, I mean, of course, when you talk about Hoysalas, you will remember Belur, Halebeed, and Somnathpura. But there are so many smaller temples which are gems in their own right. So I would strongly urge you to, check out many of these temples that you see near Hasan and all that. So this is a place called Turuvekerege near Hasan. So this is a unique temple because this is where normally, I mean, if you've seen Hoysala temples, they have a transformation of the Dravida Shikara, the southern kind of Shikara, the spire of the temple. But here, you have a Hoysala interpretation of the Nagara Shikara, that's the northern Shikara. They're very rare. There are very few temples that you can, of the Hoysalas, which have the northern spire. So Turuvekere, the Mula Shankareshwara temple is one. So this temple, so usually you find in these little towns that there would be a Vishnu temple in the middle of the settlement, and there would be an Agrahara around it, and the Shiva temple will be on the periphery. So this one is on the periphery, and the Shiva temple and the Vishnu temple both have the exact same kind of plan. This is something which is known as a semi-stellate plan. And but interestingly, though the temple is oriented east-west, the entry is from the south. Okay, and the eastern wall is left blank. So this is a Shikara that I was telling you, the semi-stellate kind of thing. So partly it is straight and partly it is turned square. Now I won't go into the geometry details of that. And you can see the Hoysala Nagara Shikara here. And this is the entry, the porch or the Mukhamantapa from the south which is coming in. And the eastern wall is blank like I was telling you, but there is this shrine model, and the center of it there is this carved hole. And when you look close, it's actually, you can see that it's very proper. It's not just some aperture. Because the wall with all its offsets, by that time it's about 1.5 meters, 1.6 meters in thickness. And this is also almost, you're looking almost, this is almost towards exact cardinal west. This is taken with a handheld mobile direction app, so it's not very accurate. But it points to the cardinal west actually. And the whole faces the cardinal east, and you can see here how deep it is. And so if you look at it, in that time, there was a lot of deterioration of the thing here. You can see the deity, which is Linga. If you look through that thing, you can see it more clearly here. So then I realized that this is probably for the sunlight to come in. I'll tell you reason for that, because this is the plan. So the Vishnu temple in the middle of the settlement has exactly same plan, except that you enter from here. This porch comes here. Other than that, the plan is exactly, absolutely similar. Okay, so this is what I was telling you about the semi-stellate. The three cardinal directions, you have the straight ones, and the intermediate things you have a stellate plan. That's why it's called a semi-stellate plan. So you have the Garbhagriha, the vestibule or the Antarala, and the Navaranga or the close mantapa, and the Mukhamantapa comes from the south. And this is the aperture from the east. In fact, I had to add it, this plan that Professor Rangaraju had supplied, they have not even noticed this thing here. But if you look at it closer, we went there in spring equinox of 2022 to look at it. Unfortunately, they had dismantled the top portion of the temple to reset it, but this portion was relatively intact. So the problem here is that when you look through this from the inside and look outside, you will see that you can see a little Okay, I think I hold it for too long, I think it goes off. Anyway, so I'll do it there. So you see that there's a lot of, you're not seeing the sky here because there's some structures which have come up in later period. So this stamba, Vijay Stamba was, the pillar was created in the subsequent Vijayanagara period. It's of granite, whereas the other thing is of soapstone. And there's also this compound wall and the areca nut plantation or whatever which has come on the other side. So when you actually look at it, you can see that much of it is covered, so you cannot really observe the sunrise. So that's where sometimes technology helps you. You have all these mobile apps where you can see what, you point it and you see what heavenly bodies are there. So that's exactly what we did. Okay. So you can see that on that day, rising sun is framed exactly in the center of that aperture. So if you can ask people to just remove that compound wall and maybe cut off the areca nut plantation, you still would have the sunlight falling on the deity on equinox days. Okay, now nearby to this there is another temple in a place called Nagalapura, within 12 kilometers of this place. Nagalapura also has a Shiva temple and a Vishnu temple. So the Shiva temple is called Kedareshwara, and here too you have the temple is oriented east-west and the entry is from the south, though it is partly unfinished and partly dilapidated also. And here, the east, you have the same hole. Of course, the sculptural stones which would have faced the thing are not there, they've fallen off. But then you can see the aperture here. And when you look through it, you can see it above the Nandi, you can see the aperture. And that also the sunlight would have fallen on. Here, there's a problem. There's a tree, huge tree which has come up, which is blocking the entrance here. Otherwise, you still would have it here. And so this is a thing. When you look from here, that's a view that the aperture would see. The path in which the sunlight would have fallen, the tree was not there. And then I was thinking of whether there are any other pieces to it. So these are all built in the middle of the 13th century. So around 1249, 1260 or something like that. So you have this Sadashiva temple at a place called Nugehalli. Notice the tower. This is also another of the northern style towers that the Hoysalas have made. So I think, yeah, you can see the tower closer up here. It's a version of what you call the Bhumija, but I won't go into details of what it is, but it is quite likely that the artisans who worked on this, because it's only time, and Professor Shetter has estimated that each of these temples took only about 8 to 10 years to be completed. Okay, so all these are within, so this is the earlier one, then you have Nagalapura, and then you have Turuvekere. So it's quite likely that same artisans have worked on it. So the interesting thing here is that, I don't know whether I have the plan of this, but yeah, so there's a Nandi Mandapa on the east, which has got a perforated screen. Okay, so and there's also an entry, there's a wall there. So these are when you can compare the plans here. So I won't use that pointer. So this is the Nugehalli temple. So this is the Nandi Mandapa, and these are all perforated screens. So they kind of sunlight can come through it, and then you have a door. So that's actually acting like an aperture here. So maybe there's something that they noticed here, the sunlight falling on the deity here, and that is what they made into a formalized thing in the later, which was built about 20 years after that particular temple. This is only a conjecture. We know that some artisans, because they have left the signatures on it, we know some of the artisans who worked in Nugehalli have also worked in Nagalapura and also worked in Turuvekere on the Vishnu temples. But this, the Mule Shankareshwara temple has only 2 inscriptions, and those names do not match with any of the earlier artisans there. And then, while I was discussing it with an art historian called Srinivas Padigar, so he was telling me something very interesting, that when you have, so these are most of these Shaiva temples belong to a sect called the Pashupata Shaivism. So in that, whenever you have a Dvikuta temple, Dvikuta is when you have 2 shrines facing each other across a common Navaranga, or common Mandapa. So then, in this case, for example, this is the main shrine. The same thing, this is a Bucheshwara temple at a place called Koravangala near Hassan. This is the main shrine where the Shivalinga has been enshrined. And then across this court, you have a Surya shrine here. So when you have a Trikuta temple, for example, when you have Shiva, Vishnu and Surya, it will invariably be Surya who is facing. You can see that here, for example. This is the Shiva temple in Bucheshwara. Interior of it, you have the Nandi there and the Shivalinga there. And right behind is this shrine. Okay, so you have it's a beautiful Hoysala Surya. So the lotus has become very abstracted. You can see the motif. It has become a very filigreed kind of work there. A very rich, and the 7 horses of Surya. And then also this beautiful the heralds of dawn. Like Surya is always shown with these two ladies shooting arrows. So they are the Usha and Pratyusha, the heralds of dawn shooting arrows of light, announcing the arrival of the sun's disk or whatever. So what the artisan here has done in Nagalapura and Turuvekere has done, instead of having an idol of Surya, they've allowed directly and fall on the deity. So I thought that's a pretty cool thing to do, because it shows that even within the constraints of whatever Shilpa text and all that, what you had ample scope for experimentation and adding your own creative touch to touch the buildings. So then I was just looking through the photographs I've taken. I didn't have this in mind when I visited this place called Basaralu, where you have Mallikarjuna temple, which is again a Shiva temple. Okay. So here too, the plan is like that. You have the Shivalinga. This is a Trikuta temple, so you have these three deities here. That one does not have any idol right now. And here there is a Nandi Mandapa, which also has this perforated screens. So while looking at the, so it's got entries. If I look at so it's got entries from both sides, from the north and from the south. And here you have these jalis which are going around in the. Okay, so you can see this thing here. This is the entry from the north, and you have the jalis, the pier screens which are here. But when you look at the view, if you notice something, you see, okay. You can see something here which is a sort of a cutout thing. And then coming in here, this is a view that from the Nandi Mandapa when you look inwards. And when you look towards the Nandi, you see a blaze of light which is coming from there, which I didn't notice at that point of time when I had visited this. But then you can see somebody has cut this out. Now, I don't know whether this is a modern age thing, because in a day and age when these kind of things happen, this is a place called Balawadi, where there's a Veeranarayan temple there at Balawadi. So somebody has cut out a hole here so there can be some ventilation. So I don't know if something like that has happened here, or it is actually for the light they have done this thing, but it's an interesting thing worth following it up. So now what I'm trying to do is to look at precursors. So what the Hoysala people have done is that the previous rulers were the Kalyani Chalukyas, the 10th to 12th centuries, and the architecture, the style of architecture which was developed during the Kalyani Chalukya period is what was taken into the what do you call the Hoysala style, and they have worked on it. They have worked on the mostly on the ornamentation part of it, but the basic architectural language is the same as that. So the idea is to check out whether there are any temples of the okay. Before that, one more thing that you notice, if you look at the satellite maps of all these places, all these 4 places, Turuvekere, Nagalapura, Nuggehalli and Basaralu, you find that apart from Basaralu, all the other things are all on the western shores of a largest water body, which means that your eastern horizon will always be plain. You are not going to put any other buildings there or anything. It's going to be water. And no, invariably, there are all these places where we have noticed this sunlight phenomenon happening. They made sure that the eastern horizon is relatively unobstructed. So that I think is a case that supports it. Of course, in Basaralu that is not there, it's land here, but in Basaralu we are not sure whether that thing was intentional. Even if they had made that cutout there, it is an afterthought, so maybe that's why they didn't plan it this way. Yeah, so the idea is to look for precursors. So this is a temple. I was just looking through published plans of Kalyani Chalukya temples. So this is published by Professor Adam Hardy. So there's this place called Neeralgi in northern Karnataka, Siddharameshwara temple here. So you have a Shiva temple here, and here there seems to be a nice little shrine with a hole here. And according to him, to Adam Hardy, it has the right orientation too, because this is east. So the hole is in the east, but it's something that you have to actually visit there and verify. So these are the first part. The Sunlight Cave has been published already in this Journal of Astronomical History and Heritage. This one is in press now. The one about the 2 Shaiva temples, the Nagalapura and this thing. This one you can it's open access. You can read it from the side there. So I'll stop with that. I think I finished quite early. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Talk was very good, sir. There is one temple called Gavigangadhareshwara in Bangalore as well.
Gavigangadhareshwara.
Yeah, wherein during the summer solstice, this Makara Sankranti, it's been made that the sunlight will exactly fall on the on the Shiva deity there, and
Yeah.
it moves along. So and there is something called as Sankramanas. I mean, lot of temples they say in South India will follow that solstice thing. I mean, whenever we have this summer solstice or the winter solstice, this kind of phenomenon will happen. Like they will construct in such a way that the light will fall on the deity and move along. So how would they do it? I mean, because to calculate the sun's movement and along with the time thing, it's very difficult, right, to do that particular calculation of time and space.
Actually, even if you look at these megalithic things, one way to arrive at it is analytically when you do it, like we would do today. But another one is observationally. Like if you want to take the solstice extreme rising, you just observe for a few years, and you can actually do it. So that's where, I mean, for example, Fred Hoyle has written a book on Stonehenge. So he says that one of the problems that archaeoastronomers face when they started talking about these things to a community largely of archaeologists, they didn't believe it because they were thinking that they were primitive people in the megalithic period. They were building rough-looking structures. Did they have the sophisticated understanding of astronomy? That seemed to be, jarring in there. But then the thing is that when you're actually looking at, if you just sacrifice a few years to observation there and have wooden posts or something staked out at every day at sunrise at different parts on the horizon and make it over a period of 3 or 4 years, you will understand that there's a cycle which recurs. So at that level, it does not need sophisticated understanding of astronomy. So that's what I would say, that to make the sunlight fall on a deity is actually quite easy. You don't need sophisticated mirrors and stuff like that. Do it if you plan it out well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is Guru Prasad here. I just wanted to know how did they align it in the north-south, because the compass, now we have compass, magnetic compass and digital compasses and GPS and all, but how would they have arrived at the north-south? One, and then the second question is, like, this is all sun-oriented. Are there any temples which are also moon oriented or star
I have not come across the second part. If I answer first, I told at the beginning of the thing that it's a little, I mean, I have some, at Nilaskal I have some idea about the lunar, but it's too early to say. I wouldn't put it out open. But to answer your first question, you don't need a magnetic compass to do that. Early on, very early Shilpa text talk about the gnomon or the shanku, which is used at so basically you make a circle and you put a stick in the middle of the center of the circle, and you wait till the shadows intersects the circumference, join that, and the perpendicular to that would be your north direction. So they had methods to.
Okay.
North determination was easy.
All right. And there is one message which I saw, that there are some temples which are aligned across longitude.
Yeah, it's this forward which is going around.
Yeah.
Shiva temple is all in a straight line, right? So,
yes,
what I would say is that when you make such a statement, I haven't looked at that,
right.
but the way to approach it would be to first look at whether there's any, they are all built in the same period or there's any connection between them. And also, are they the only temple? If you take a large enough scan, because there's so many temples in this country, so you can always take a line and find things that fit onto that and say only. So is there any particular other thing binding these structures together?
That's the thing. Like, because within the temple itself, you have different elements which are aligned with the sun and all.
Yeah.
But inter-temple, is there any alignment?
Between temples.
Yeah. So like
Kumbakonam, I haven't looked at that, but I would suggest that this is the way to go about it. First of all, see why they're including only certain temples and why are they leaving out.
Right. So maybe you can, you're a good person to debunk or see that. Yeah. And also, what about the Kumbakonam, all the 9 Navagraha temples? So I mean, if there been a study done on those, like, because it has all the sun, the moon, all the
the planets. Of our scheme, Rahu and Ketu are also, which is the ascending node and the descending node of the lunar orbit, isn't it? So there are, now that's what I was telling you about deification of structures that of heavenly bodies. So Navagrahas have been the.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out whether there is some order in the chaos, like, or is it just random?
No, if you look at the Navagraha, it's like a square, a 3 by 3 kind of thing, right? And that the position and the orientation of each deity in that is a standard thing.
Okay. Not the Navagraha, the Navagraha temples.
Okay.
There is a temple.
Whether there's a pattern between the temples?
Yes,
No,
yes,
I have not
yes.
looked at that.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Just to giving some ideas onto that. And is there any relation between like Indian temples, this orientation, and any other temple abroad which has been like Angkor Wat or for that matter the Mayan temples or the Inca
Orientation
temples?
itself is a very giant temple in this place, what do you call, in Aihole, is oriented north. So you have temple with all kinds of orientation than that, and it's not that straightforward. Why? Because some people say, okay, temples to this deity, only some of the Raudra deities face south and all that. It's not really. I've found many things which are not consistent with that also. So it is something that needs to be studied actually.
Yeah.
Orientation of temples
also
across the
these South Indian temples where it's built by stone, it's easy to orient it. I mean, relatively easy. But what about the rock cut temples where the rock exists and you have to cut it? Like, so are they also oriented like Ajanta, Ellora?
Ajanta, of course, it's a long U-shaped, the horseshoe-shaped shape the river Vagora takes, right? So it's like a horseshoe-shaped cliff that have been excavated. But there is an what has written about cave number 29, which is an unfinished cave at the top, so usually they are all more or less radially into this arch-like thing which is going here. But then cave 26, which was being built by the emperor called Harisena, and then later there was the other, I forget who is the one who, overran that dynasty, it's Vakadagada. So he has made it, it's in a place where the orientation is not radial, it's been deliberately turned to face the solstice. Okay. Yeah, in rocket temple also it's possible, but it's much tougher, of course, to do that.
And also the hill temple where the local features define the orientation, like Kedarnath and temples where the river also plays a role in the orientation of the temple. How is it like? Is it oriented towards the sun or the local rocks or the hills orient the temple?
You mean it's the topological, topographical condition. Right. Sometimes that also happens because like if you look at Hampi, so many places you have temples facing in different direction, but then there are these granite inselbergs which are, and in between there are this place where they have run the bazaars. So very often you find the bazaars at a different angle from the orientation of the temple. So there are very obviously it is topography which has dictated the way it should be laid out. Right.
Okay. So any other element like the astronomical influence and then topography?
We don't know whether every temple is laid out astronomically. We don't know whether they face it. Why would something face north? I mean, I wouldn't say. That's why I've limited it to some places in which very undoubtedly it is a solar orientation which has played a part.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. Great talk. So I have two questions. So during your presentation, you did mention the Shivalaya in Badami was supposedly to be a Surya temple, but it is a Shiva temple. Is there any reason why maybe it got converted into a Shiva temple?
No, because it looks like if you look at many of there are 3-4 temples which you see out there. So there's one thing which is called the Upper Shivalaya. All are called Shivalaya. There's Upper Shivalaya, there's a Lower Shivalaya, and then there's a Malagiti Shivalaya. So the Upper Shivalaya was a Vishnu temple. From the iconographic program on the outer walls, there's Govardhana Giridhari, the Narasimha. So it's all Vaishnava themed. So it was a Vishnu temple for sure. And then the Lower Shivalaya was from the oval nature of the Pita on which the idol was kept. They say that it was Ganapati was the idol there. So when deities go missing for whatever reasons, and later it's very easy to put a linga there. I mean, that's what I think it is. So you find that all these temples become Shivalayas. I don't think there's any hostile takeover kind of scenario there. But it's usually that the deities goes missing in many temples, and then somebody puts a piece of stone there and calls it a Shivalaya.
Also, one more question. So, as you mentioned, not all the temples are like east facing or having these unique architecture of the sun coming to the deity. But all these temples which have, does it have any religious approach or religious purpose, or is it just astronomical purpose?
No, I think it's religious also, because in Pashupata-Shaivism, Surya occupies a great thing. So there are texts which talk about the practice of Pashupata-Shaivism. They say you come in, you first worship Surya, and only then you go to so it's probably that. That's why you have a Surya icon there like in Bucheshwara we were talking about. And then later somebody just took liberties with the thing and made Surya come in through the aperture there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. I just wanted to check if you have done any study on the Sringeri, the temple.
Oh yeah, I haven't done, but this Dr. B.S. Shailaja she has a paper in Current Science about that. Okay, only thing I know is that the Rashi pillars that they say, right, the 12. So there's a mantapa with 12 pillars in it, and it says that when the sun is in that particular Rashi, that particular pillar is illuminated. That doesn't happen. In fact, 2 of the pillars never get illuminated. So that is a myth. It's not really true. That Professor Dr. Shailaja's paper talks about that. Yes. Okay, that's a whole. That's a little problematic thing because I mean, unless you find some burial in the some organic matter within, then you can't really date them. And in the whole gamut of archaeological studies, megaliths are not very fashionable. So then they've been kind of neglected. So for more than 3,000 known megalithic sites, we have only a handful of dates. And that too, some of these sites are active throughout centuries. So you have one date for a site like Hirabanikal maybe, where there are more than 1,000 megaliths of some form or the other. So that must have been, I mean, maybe 3-4 centuries over that it might have developed. So we don't have a proper horizontal excavation of megalithic sites satisfactorily. So yeah, the general conjecture is that they are about 1500 BCE to first few centuries of Common Era. Okay, so but that might change if you do a proper study. No, I'm but I would love it if some archaeologist would excavate that place. It's also not a protected site, so it is very. I mean, it's government land, but it's not a protected archaeological site. So, like Hanam Sagar, it could also disappear one day. You want to create some kind of an observational thing during the equinox or something? Yeah.
So you.
Sorry, I came a bit late. I think I missed much of your lecture. You were talking about Trikuteshwara temple and things like that. There are also very good examples of temples which are like in Mosale, there are 2 temples adjacent, and then Govindanalli, 5 next to each other. Do they have some patterns with respect to the orientation?
I don't know. Both of Mosale are oriented the same way. Mosale is just twin temple. One is Shiva temple and Vishnu temple, side by side in this case.
Even in Sudi it is there.
Yeah, Sudi is which one? The Jodu Kalasha.
Jodu
Kalasha is an example of this. You have Surya and others. There's no idol remaining, but the Lalar Bimba or the lintel image is that of Surya. So the empty cell must have contained Surya. So that's exactly similar in the Kalyani Chalukya period. So you have Shiva and so that's again a Pashupata Shaiva temple. So
and in Govindanhalli they are all adjacent to each other, but they are not connected.
But Govindanhalli, I feel that Govindanhalli as well as the Pancha Kuta and this place in Somnathpura, I think they are commemorative temples. So each linga is in memory of a particular person.
You had a question.
You're talking about Stonehenge earlier, sir. So what's the significance of it? I mean, was it an astronomical observatory or? Because still it's divided.
No, it was. I don't think it was an astronomical observatory. And there's a whole notion of. I mean, I myself am guilty of it. I published a book in 2012 about where I said that they were observatories and all. I mean, we keep updating ourselves. So the thing is, I don't think it was. See, for example, Jacquetta Hawkes, who was a very well-known archaeologist, she said that every era has a Stonehenge it deserves or desires. Okay, so people have been reinventing it. Some people say it was a temple to Apollo. Somebody says it was a astronomical observatory. It is probably a monument to the dead again. So now they have seen the whole landscape. So you have in the Salisbury plain, you have an area, I forget what it's called, the other site, but that's the area where the settlement of the people who created this was there. And they would come there. So there's a processional pathway called the avenue, which comes in. That is the only astronomical orientation which has been proved without doubt, beyond doubt. That when you come up there, it's pointing at the winter solstice sunrise. Okay, and so there being an extreme climate, so when the winter solstice comes in there's hope that the sun travels northwards again, and warmer days will come and all that. So maybe that was the significance of it. We won't know what exactly it was, but it was a processional pathway which came in towards the realm of the dead, and that's where. I think it was a burial place obviously with some orientation based on their cultural beliefs or whatever. So.
I have probably a very naive question. If these temples were built in like the 6th century, and now we are seeing it that the sunlight is actually falling on the deity, is there should we correct for the time? Or
no, in the case, that's what, if it was a star or something, you might have to correct for it. Because there's a phenomenon known as the precession of the equinoxes, which is basically your Earth's axis, though it's at the same angle with respect to the orbital plane. It also describes a circle which takes over 26,000 years to complete. So that affect the rise and set point of the stars. But on the local horizon, the extreme points of sunrise will not change. That could change only with there's a slight nodding movement of the Earth's axis, called nutation, so if the inclination of the Earth's axis changes, then obviously the spread of the thing would change. But that's a very small effect, and so for all practical purposes, it wouldn't change.
Anyone has any? Yeah.
Hi. I just wanted to ask you, have you watched the Netflix documentary Ancient Apocalypse?
No, I haven't.
Please do, because there's a lot more information about these only solar facing or equinox facing or solstice facing monuments. And you just mentioned precession. So they have even discussed in the documentary that some of those monuments have calculations, keeping in mind precessions, which means to say they have been observing the stars and the galaxies for thousands of years. Right now, the monuments that you have discussed seem to be very simple monuments which can be explained with simple observations. But a lot of the monuments which are elsewhere in the world, Göbekli Tepe, which was 12,000 years ago, pointing at exactly one point, and we also assume that the particular apocalypse happened around 12,800 years ago, and a lot of these monuments started popping up. So I do believe that, especially if you look back 10, 12,000 years ago, the people at that time were not just, hunter-gatherers or farmers, and they had a lot more intricate knowledge about the universe as well, including if you see the Sphinx, if I'm not mistaken, has been now predated to a lot earlier, because there's actually water erosion marks on the sides of it, which take thousands of years, and there was no water or rain in the Egyptian deserts until I think some 10, 15,000 years back. So I honestly believe that there's a lot more to this. Maybe these temples are simple, but I think the other monuments, especially covered in the Ancient Apocalypse, are a lot more complicated to understand, at least from our perspective. So yeah, just a suggestion.
Yeah, you're right, because I've never subscribed to the thought that ancient people are so primitive. In fact, they were more in tune with, because they were using it to tell time, they were using it to tell the seasons and all that. So obviously, it was first-hand experience. So I don't think that they were primitive from that point of view. Only thing is that, so if you look at many of these so-called claims of high precision alignments, which is what archaeoastronomer like Alexander Thom, who established archaeoastronomy on a sort of a decent footing in the Western world. So he had made very high precision alignments, which are now found to be not really true. But low precision alignments to many of these phenomena on the local horizon were very widely prevalent in the ancient times. And I'm sure that even in the early Stone Age also people were knowledgeable about it.
And I think even more knowledgeable, but also they executed it because, for
Yeah.
example, even the pyramids calculate the Earth's circumference. They have a measure for a meter at that point of time, which was exactly the circumference of the Earth divided by 40 million. How did they know that? So yeah, it's just something that we don't understand, but I think there's a lot more to it in terms of, because even precession, when you mentioned, that's when I asked this question. Otherwise, I didn't feel
Even
it
this
was.
Alexander Thom had come up with a unit called the megalithic yard, which he said that there was a unit which was used in the megalith building period in Europe, and yeah, so he has some work done on that unit of length.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any last question? One second, actually.
The texts are all later. So when you look at so there's always the argument whether the text came first or the temples came first. It looks like, I mean, this is my point of view, and many people also agree with that. The text came later. So you find texts happening. I mean, Vishnu Dharmottara Purana has some temple building ideas. Then the dedicated temple architecture texts come later. So when temple architecture, through the efforts of these artisans who work there, they have developed a language, I would say, of architecture, kind of a grammar, how you put the different components together. And once it came to a certain level of maturity, okay, so I don't think they have a very ancient text. They might have been obviously ready reckoners and all among the practitioners, but I don't think they were widely. I mean, like Bhoja Samarangana Sutradhara is 10th century. So they, by that time, temple architecture has become very mature. You will find most of the inscriptions have been, you will find it in records of the local archaeological, like, like for example, if you look at Badami, all the inscriptions of the temple of the early Chalukya have been collected in one volume. Of course, there will be so many other things that people discover. I myself, in many of my travels, I find unrecorded inscriptions very often. But these are mostly, I mean, the temple Vastu texts are talking about how you go about planning temples, whereas these inscriptions are about, this temple to be built in this, on the solar eclipse day of this particular year. They are mostly dedicatory inscriptions or donations and donations and stuff like that. Or they say this village has been donated to this temple, so the proceeds can go towards lighting an oil lamp in this temple. There are most of the inscriptions are of that nature, barring a few. In what is that temple called? Like Dodda Gadavali, it's a Lakshmi Devi temple. There you have Hoysala temple. There you have some things talking about the architecture in the temple also. Very rarely, mostly they are dedicated.
Okay, I think with that we'll come to a close to today's session. Thank you, Srikumar,
Thank you
for this brilliant talk, and I'm sure everyone will agree that these are spectacular visuals. Thank you for sharing with us. We have a small token of appreciation by, I request Sandeep Menon from the Office of Communication to gift you this, our small, I'll give it to me. So it's a befitting opening to the Paraspar series up for this year. I request everyone to join us for the remaining sessions in the following months, and please join for tea outside. Thank you.
I don't know what happened in that thing. I first started in